Let's check in with Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine.
Everyone raising money to support the troops. Some people have already been wounded in battle. Scientists, artists, everyone together, resisting together.
Joe Lindsley.
Joe Lindsley is quickly becoming an American treasure in broadcasting.
Welcome to Ukraine Bank.
Secretary of State Blinken is in Kyiv on a previously unannounced trip. Meanwhile, Putin is in China as the Russians ramp up their attacks in Ukraine. That's where Joseph Lindsley is. Joe, what's the word today? How you doing there?
Hey, Bob, good afternoon from Lviv. And, yesterday was a day of many air raid alarms throughout the country, including here. But ultimately, there was no major activity except, of course, besides the front line and Kharkiv region. And the Russians, they've been making progress there. I mean, it looks like they've captured about 5 miles worth of territory, about 5 miles within Ukraine. And the Ukrainians have pushed back in some places, but the Russians steadily are trying to push through and to break through, as they approach Kharkiv city. Right now the fighting is about 15 miles from Kharkiv city. And so most people at the edge of the city can hear and feel the sounds of war. And, this has not been like that since 2022. In 2022, portions of Kharkiv region were occupied, and the Russians were on the edge of the city. People were shooting from their apartment buildings at the incoming Russians. But because of that liberation of Kharkiv region that happened in September of 2022, I remember I was speaking to you from Saltivka, the northern neighborhood of Kharkiv. I was speaking live with you all at WGN, and I could hear the sounds of the battles. The cluster bombs were falling nearby us. But it turns out that was the day of the liberation of that region. And since then, besides missile attacks on the city and the region, there has been no ground war there. And so it's really painful for a lot of people to see Ukrainians whose villages have already been liberated now having to evacuate again, or now having to suffer under occupation again. And I think this is part of the reason why President Zelenskiy, when he met with Secretary Blinken in Kyiv today, he was very clear. He said, in particular, Ukraine needs 2 Patriot missile systems for Kharkiv city. And this is the first time, I think, at that level and publicly that's been said. That's been the wish and the hope of many people in Kharkiv. That's part of the reason why I spent so much time reporting there, to understand the mentality of the people so close to the edge. But I think in a lot of ways, Kharkiv was forgotten about until this past week. Many people didn't think about it or talk about it. And now President Zelenskiy's, trying to see if the United States will send its very effective Patriot systems to Kharkiv city. And one sticking point, remains is the U.S. still does not, the White House in particular, still does not want Ukraine to hit targets on Russian soil. And so in a sense, while Russia was building up its troops on the border once again, Ukrainians, they could use drones. They could use their colleagues in the Free Russia Legion, a very small unit, but they couldn't use American weapons. They had to wait until the Russians are actually on Ukrainian soil. And this is a big frustration. I think here we're seeing with that type of mentality, you can easily lose progress. And then on the other hand, I do hear people criticizing, in fact, the Ukrainians, Kyiv did change command for the Kharkiv region. So criticizing, the military for not being quite prepared for this. But meanwhile, Russia keeps pushing this idea that they can somehow have Kharkiv city. And, I'm in regular contact with so many people there. And it's important to remember that one of the most popular phrases right now in the wartime, which I cannot say on radio, I don't think I can even say it in Ukrainian. It's about Vladimir Putin. And you hear this phrase even from nuns and priests and grandmas and girls who sing in the church choir. But we can't say it on the radio. But it was coined by the football hooligans of Kharkiv City in 2014, the Metalist football club. When Russia tried to invade that city in 2014, they tried to take advantage of Ukrainians. The pro-Putin government fled the country. After that revolution, the people were in charge. There wasn't even really police force. And there was citizens that defended Kharkiv, and especially the football hooligans. So they coined this phrase, and someone reminded me of that the other day, that it came from Kharkiv. This phrase that you'll hear even here in Lviv, and it's as someone said to me, I don't think Russia really can prosper in such a place. There really is no chance of the people of Kharkiv city giving up. But that's why President Zelensky is saying, okay, well, let's, because every day and night almost the city is getting attacked by missiles. With those Patriot missile systems, Kharkiv could become like Kyiv, almost protected by an iron dome. And the other big news and encouraging news, after 2 years of talking, and the Danish prime minister said today that the F-16s that Denmark is sending to Ukraine, they finally got permission from Washington to do so, will be within Ukraine within a month. And so there's a great hope that that equipment, if they're brought here in the right way, can make a difference, especially in places like Kharkiv.
What are you hearing? What are people saying they're thinking about Putin's visit with the Chinese president?
I haven't heard much about people. I think people probably, so much attention is focused on Kharkiv here, and even on Secretary Blinken's visit. But because for Ukrainians, it's no new news, that Russia and China have been cooperating. I've been talking with a lot of people working to do research on the international sanctions against Russia, and how China has been a key ally and partner with Russia, as has India in some ways. And so there's lots of good evidence that they've been cooperating, and even by having these state visits. Meanwhile, as a reminder, Beijing is a totalitarian regime, like Moscow, and the same way it was in the 20th century. And we think about the fall of the Berlin Wall. What has really changed? Countries like Ukraine and Georgia, where there were protests every day, they got their freedom, but we still have this axis of totalitarianism. And over the weekend here in Lviv, I went to several concerts, and it sort of reminded me, there was a band that was big in the 90s, like sort of punk resistance. There's a modern band called Pie and Whip in translation, and they play the music of murdered poets. They take their words, poets who the Soviets killed, and they make it into modern music. And I'm looking at all these people in Lviv at this concert, and realizing, at first I thought, well, it's kind of weird to be in a concert in the war. But then I think in Kharkiv, people are also playing underground music. And I looked at the people around me, and there's all different ages, but the older ones, so many of them have stories about their life under communism, especially in the 1980s, where they would play music as an act of protest. And that's still what Ukrainians are doing, even in the war. And so I thought of that as I listened to these, sort of these songs of resistance. It's so important for Ukrainians to have that as an act of defiance, and then to remind them of who they are. And I think in the West, so often, like our religious folk and scientific folk and artistic folk usually don't sort of hang out too much together. I think, sort of different camps. You see that it's very different here. I heard stories of how the Greek Catholic Church in the 20th century, it was made illegal by the Soviets, and the patriarch was a wealthy guy, Andriy Sheptytsky, and he was spending money to pay for artists and to pay for the poets, and knowing that that's the crown of the culture. And I saw that at these concerts in Lviv, like everyone raising money to support the troops. Some people have already been wounded in battle, scientists, artists, everyone together, resisting together. And how that's been the story of this place for more than 100 years, and it still is today.
I'm looking at your post, Joseph, and you wrote, Ukrainians have always kept singing no matter how bad the oppression. And I know every face in this video has been hurt by the war and also has found new courage and strength. And the faces you see in the video really tell the story. And we have that link to UkrainianFreedomNews.com. If you want to watch the video, just go to the Sirott Show page at WGNradio.com. Keep singing, Joe. We'll talk tomorrow.
I don't think you want me to sing, but until tomorrow.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Що він сказав?
Well, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?
Єбать.